Hello, everybody. Welcome to the very last week of this 6-week term. And for week 6, we are now in finals week and we have 2 lesson plans this week. If you finish lesson plan 12 in week 5, fantastic. Then you can concentrate on lesson plan 13 and 14. To start off on the top here, let's look at the first bullet. It says participation post. And I would like, if you possible, in the participation form, if you could just write a few lines, a paragraph at most, about how your research went. It doesn't constitute your project, that little small paragraph you're writing. Actually, you do the 2 to 3 page report onto your website or the 5-minute video, but just to kind of share with your classmates where you went and how it went, and did you attend any service and were you recommended, that kind of thing. And then bulletproof number 2 here, participation post. I'd like to put up maybe a course evaluation, and you guys could fill it out on the participation form. Just simple questions like, is there any reading that you specifically liked or you would like to see eliminated, or what films you liked or didn't like, that kind of stuff. So a little bit of feedback there. And it does say for bullet 3, make sure your research is already up on your website in week 6. So week 4 and 5 are the 2 weeks you should be working on it. Week 6, you need to get it on your website. Officially, it's going to be graded along with all your final work for the semester. So by the Friday noon at the end of week 6, it would be fine. But I'd get it up as soon as you can in week 6. Okay, let's go ahead and just move right down to the lesson plan. So lesson plan 13 is the branches of Christianity. There's no lecture, the branches of Christianity. I have kind of a little professor's notes on what's the difference between a Christian and a Catholic. I get asked that all the time. And the answer is a Catholic is a Christian. A Catholic is part of the Christian umbrella. There's about 2 billion Christians on the planet and 1 billion of them being Catholic. So it's about half of the Christian community. And who's the founder of Christianity? What's the role of Paul? Most world religions books indicate that the founder of Christianity is Paul. And that may seem a little strange to you. Why is it mentioned as Jesus? Because Paul's the one whose writing makes up most of the New Testament, not all of it, but a big chunk of it. And Paul's the one that really establishes the theology to a large extent. And the different diverse positions within Christianity in its early years, most students aren't aware that the 2,000 years of Christian history has gone through a lot of changes, and Christianity we have today is very different than it was in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century and 4th century. As a matter of fact, in the 4th century, this is a little paragraph giving an example of the disagreements and diversity within Christianity. And one example is, for instance, in the 300s, around the 4th century, there were 2 Christian leaders. One was Arius, you see his name here, one was Athanasius, and they both argued very different positions of who and what Jesus was. Arius was arguing that Jesus was a model of spirituality, he was the height of humanity, so to speak, kind of like a Buddha figure, but himself not the Son of God, because only God is God. Athanasius argued that Jesus was, in fact, the Son of God. And so those different theological positions led to a lot of acrimony, a lot of warring camps within Christianity, and we had Constantine ordering them to hold a church council and to settle the dispute, of which it was voted that Athanasius won and Arius did not. And that's just an example of showing you some interesting twists and turns within the history of Christianity. And out of that church council, the Council of Nicaea, we get the Nicene Creed, which as a child I used to say all the time in church, and a lot of you would probably be familiar with it. It starts off with, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, etc. Okay, and then I continue on a few other notes of Reformation, Eastern Western Church here. Okay, moving out of that, divisions within Christianity. Okay, the 3 major divisions here. And those are my notes for my students on campus, so it's up to you if you want to look at that. Required reading, yes, absolutely. We have Christian denominations that introduces you to 3 forms: Catholicism, Orthodox Christianity, Protestant. And the Protestant branches, I introduce you to 7 different branches. And then this is something that's really not being tested on. A lot of students always ask me, well, why don't you cover the Mormon Church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? And why don't you cover the Jehovah's Witnesses? And so I just put up some notes that I have on them, just for your own interest about how the religion started, who's the founder, what are some belief systems. And I mentioned down here, there's a lot of other 19th and 20th century branches of Christianity, for instance, the Seventh-day Adventist, the Christian Scientist, etc. So there's a lot that we cannot cover in this class because there's so much to cover. So clicking out of that, the film, I focused on the Amish because I thought a lot of students have an interest in the Amish tradition, and it walks you through the life of what it's like to be an Amish member, and you really kind of live with the Amish family on film for from my requirement, it's just 20 minutes, but if you watch the whole thing, it's an hour documentary, I believe. And then this down here is Christianity in China, in Iran, and also in Ethiopia. And a lot of places you would think Christianity exists there, but indeed it does. And I thought that was neat to look at. Post question is there, and the exact question. Okay, there we go. Clicking out of this lesson plan, moving on to the last lesson plan of the semester. It's called Biblical Scholarship of the New Testament. And it's really not looking at the entire New Testament. It's really examining what's called the quest for the historical Jesus. And my lecture notes, let's see what I have here. One of the scholars that's world famous in this area is he's actually was an ex-Catholic priest. His name is John Dominic Crossan. And I give you a little bit of background. What is the quest for the historical Jesus? 18th and 19th century is when it started, and it's still very strong today. Like who Jesus was, what he taught. There's a difference between what we call the Christ of faith versus the history of Jesus. And what scholars are interested in is the history of Jesus. So Crossan and his research that he's done, and a little bit of summary of his work, and so forth. So I got some very important notes for you to read through here that I wrote. Okay, I don't have time to go through all of those, but make sure you do. Moving to the required reading. This seems intimidating, and that's why it's very important you're listening to this weekly directive. First of all, it says at the top, there's a total of 12 pages of reading for this lesson plan. It looks so much more when you're looking at it. It is not. This is the quest for the historical Jesus, so it just introduces to what the quest is about, and it's done by PBS Frontline. Excellent, definitely an important read. The historical Jesus, sometimes I have these fun one-pagers, like 6 things you never knew about Jesus type of thing. Okay, where was he really born, and etc. And scholars say something very different than the believer there. And then this one here is written by Bart Ehrman, and again, a world-renowned scholar in biblical studies. Was himself at one time a conservative fundamentalist Christian, but switched to much more of an agnostic scholarly approach today. But it's interesting to come from a position of a belief to one of pure scholarship and the transition that he went through to get there. And he wrote a book, I'm sorry, not a book, he wrote an article called The Right to Know, and really arguing that it's important that we ask these fundamental questions about who and what Jesus was. Now moving to Crossan has great respect for Jesus, but again, his respect for Jesus is not from a believer's perspective, but just looking at Jesus as this remarkable, inspiring human being. And these are one-pagers, okay? I used to assign this book here. It was always a requirement. Now I've reduced it down to just simple one-pagers. This let me start with this introduces to you who Crossan is. So it's just his background, what education he has, and all that. Not as essential, but for your knowledge, it might be important for you to know that. And then his methodology, definitely important. So what kind of methods does he use to garner his research on understanding the historical Jesus? Definitely an important one. Who he sees the historical Jesus as, or what he taught. Okay, definitely important. Okay, and these are just synopsis of his works. And then proof of the existence of historical Jesus. So it may seem like a strange question, but do we have any proof that Jesus existed? And you might think, oh my gosh, she's going to say no, there is no proof. No, I'm not going to argue that. I'm going to argue there is external, non-Christian sources that reference Jesus, and that's what we would need. And there are some, and the Crossan walks you through those. So yes, scholars do believe Jesus was an absolutely real person. And then Crossan on who killed Jesus, and there's a little section there. Okay, this is for my honor students, always ignore those. And so it seems much more intimidating than it is, but again, these are one-pagers. This A1 on who he is, if you want to make that optional, that's fine, but B, C, D, and E are required, and then these up here. So it's much less intimidating than it looks. And then the film here, 3 scholars, Crossan, introduce you to him. Reza Aslan, now he's an interesting guy. He teaches at UC Riverside. He was educated in his PhD in sociology of religion at UC Santa Barbara, and he is all over the news, CNN, PBS, everywhere. I see his face, I see his interviews. He's actually interesting because he has an Islamic background, but he studies Christianity. And here is his interview on who and what the historical Jesus was. He has great admiration for Jesus as well. And this is a funny optional one, but Fox News interviewed him and did a horrible job in the interview because they just kind of look like fools in the way they interviewed them. And then Bart Ehrman here. And so I made these optional, okay, but this one's the required one where he's discussing who Jesus was from an academic view. So it's Bart Ehrman, Reza Aslan, and John Dominic Crossan. Those are the three scholars to look at. And altogether, it's 45 minutes maximum for the viewing. The post question, here we go. And the exam question. I don't know why I need to click on those just to show you, but I do. Okay. Clicking out of that, the final link here for the entire semester is the final exam. And just to note, the primary questions are there, and the exam questions there, and the directions are there. And you need to send me the link to your website with all your work on it, midterm, final, everything, just the whole package deal, by the last Friday of week 6 at noon. And the reason why, again, is because I have to grade that that weekend, because my grades are due on Monday. So that would conclude the course. There, again, is extra credit. That was up at lesson plan 9 if you wanted to do 9A and B. And then I end with salam, shalom, and peace. I thank you very much for being part of this course this semester. You guys have done a wonderful job. It's been my pleasure to be your professor. I welcome you to join my online ethics class if you're ever interested. It follows a similar format. I think a little less work in ethics. Religion seems to cover so much. Ethics does as well, but it seems to be focused on one topic where religion covers so many. So if you're interested in that, I welcome you to join us there. Thank you so much. Namaste. Bye-bye.